Okay, everybody, sorry for that brief intermission break. So we were talking about Augustine and the fact that we could use rhetoric to fight against evil. Now remember that Augustine really was writing at the beginning of the medieval period. So no scientific process, no educational process beyond the Bible, still coming out from the sort of pagan rule of the Roman Empire into the church rule of the Holy Roman Empire. And so he is right on that cusp. However, we then go through several hundred years before we get to Christine de Pizan. And I am skipping over those several hundred of years because I just haven't figured out how they fit just yet. So it's not desperately important that we know that right now. What is important is to know that as the Renaissances began, we were able to move more into a period of enlightenment, which is where we're getting to. During the Renaissances, I know we probably all think about movies like A Knight's Tale, or these really colorful, brilliant, artistic, huge dresses, Pirates of the Caribbean sort of Renaissance fair sort of stuff. That is sort of accurate. We definitely started to see more by way of the arts, the practice of poetry, painting, obviously, these arts that were being developed and honed. And there are Renaissances, right? There's not just one Renaissance, right? There's Renaissances all over in the different parts of Europe, even in Russia and other places. So it's important for us to remember that this did not come through and just sweep all of everything in a short period of time, but instead was over hundreds of years. Art was not the only thing to expand at the time, because science was also starting to come around. But Christine de Pizan was just like right on the edge of the start of the Renaissances, and was sort of lucky because her father worked for the king. He was his doctor, if I remember correctly. So she was educated along with the king's children. And that was just sort of lucky for her. That was happenstance. Not so lucky was that after she married and had some children, her husband died, her father died, and it was her mother, and her children that she had to take care of. And somehow, as a woman in this late medieval, early Renaissance period, had to figure out how to make money for them so that they could live, because a woman couldn't own land. A woman wasn't supposed to be able to make money. So she did what I guess only educated women could do at that point, which, by the way, were very far and few in between. And she wrote poetry, and she wrote what you might call letters or favors for the knights to give to princesses. So she understood the court. She understood the role of everybody at the court. She had some knowledge that she was taught because she was educated with the king's children, and she had an ability to read and write, which most women definitely did not have at the time. And so she was able to utilize those and sell her poetry and her writings. And some people say, well, she published them. I don't really look at it as publishing so much as just being able to sell a piece of your work, okay? They did get replicated, but not in her lifetime. And she was never rich or anything like that after the death of her husband and her father. In fact, for the most part, they were pretty poor. But she was able to feed her family and take care of them because she was able to write. And so the works that I have you read are a little bit different. They are from two of her books, and they're written sort of like in this conversational style. Not quite a dialogue, so not as hard to read as those, but a conversational style. And she addresses her works to the princesses, to the ladies and to the princesses. And the question is why? Well, if you were going to write, you should write addressing people who you are comfortable addressing. Definitely not men at the time, they wouldn't listen, but other women, particularly the princesses or the courtiers. So anybody who was in high court. If you ever saw, what's that movie with Drew Barrymore? Is it Cinderella Story? They talk about the role of the courtiers in a Cinderella story. That's somewhat accurate. At least I think that's the name of that movie. I don't even remember the name of the movie, but it's an accurate, somewhat accurate, historically, at least from what we know, portrayal of courtiers. And they would have to be able to read and go to court and know their place and understand etiquette. So when I was first taught Christine de Pizan's work, particularly the Treasury of the City of Ladies and the City of Ladies, I was taught that she was basically writing etiquette. And that is true. I mean, in a lot of senses, that's true, right? But the other thing that she does that is important for us to understand is that she is demonstrating for us how to know what your place is, what your role is, and when to speak, and what to speak about in order to achieve the goal that you want to achieve. That you understand all the means of persuasion in the situation that you're in. And some of my students in the past have said, oh, well, that, she's really taught us about organizational communication. And I'm like, I don't know if I'd go that far, but in the sense that you know what the roles are, what the hierarchy is, and your place in that hierarchy, and how to speak to others in order to be able to persuade them and move through these classes, these different classes, absolutely. So she gives us a real understanding of where women existed at the time, what their jobs were, what their roles were, how to practice the proper etiquette and speaking to talk to princes or to talk to lords or barons or whoever it is that's fighting in whatever sort of feudal hierarchy that we're dealing with at the time. And she had enough education to be able to speak on the matter with some credibility. So those are some of the things that she does for us when she writes. The other thing she does is she tells us what our virtues should be and what we shouldn't engage in. And according to her, women should never engage in talking mean-spiritedly or disparagingly about other women, because that hurts all women when you do that. She says that the most important virtue that a woman has, the most important thing that a woman has, is her, we call it now, reputation. Some people have determined it to be purity and others virginity. But I think that the message is the same. Who you are and how you present yourself in terms of your own personal virtues and values will impact whether or not people will listen to you. If you ever saw The Man in the Iron Mask, King Louis likes to take women, have sex with them, and then toss them aside. And those women would forever be seen as dirty or impure or unmarriable. They should not be married by anybody of any repute because they have been defiled, even though it was by the king and even though they didn't have a choice. That just did not matter. So Christine really gives everybody a sense of where their credibility comes from, that it comes from your purity, and that you should always, always protect your reputation, because that's the only way that you're ever going to be believable or credible. So when you read her work, she will outline what virtues it's necessary to have and therefore to demonstrate. She will illustrate for you what your role is and is not, what our jobs are and what they are not, and when it's okay for us to speak and when it's not okay for us to speak. So is it just an etiquette book? No. Is it partially an etiquette book? Yes, absolutely. It's not solely an etiquette book. It does remind people of where they are. Is it some great feminist piece of women freeing rhetoric? No, it's not. But does it help women understand what their role is in society at the time? Absolutely. And she does set the stage for writings that will come later. Now, in the medieval period, or in the ancient Greek period, if you will, we had a real battle royale between rhetoric and philosophy, right? The idea of philosophy being the search for the truth in life, the big T truth, and rhetoric sort of being seen as counter to that. In the Roman period, we really harp on this debate between rhetoric and power, and rhetoric's relationship to power, and how power structures impact the practice of rhetoric. During the medieval period, what we really get is this battle between rhetoric and the church. Okay, so sort of the structure at the time, yes, but the church particularly controlling not just the parts of rhetoric about speaking or writing, but the parts of rhetoric that tell you why you should speak or write. And you definitely should not rise up against the church. You should not be writing truths from science that aren't part of the Bible. You should not be writing or speaking about anything that did not have to do with the church and the Bible and keeping that hierarchy. Okay? So as we move into the Renaissances, and again, this is where Christine comes in, we're sort of moving in towards the Renaissances. As we move into the Renaissances, what you're going to find is that the Renaissances are about three things. One, rhetoric. Two, the aesthetic, the artistic, the beauty of things, the pretty, the rhyming poetry, the beautiful paintings, the drawings, etc. And the third is science, or the word that they use interchangeably, and I mean, I can explain this to you someday what the difference is and why they didn't make this difference, but it's probably not important to you. Reason. So we have this triangle of struggle between rhetoric, the aesthetic, and reason. Okay? And what we're going to find is as we move into the Renaissances and we start to explore art and science again, that there are going to be people who come up and say, hey, you know what? God is not the sole truth or the end of the questioning for us as humans. So enter stage left, the humanists. Now, some people reject the humanists outright and say, oh, they believe that there was no God and that humans were above God. No, that's not true. What the humanists really did as a group, I mean, surely I'm sure there were some of the people who said that, but the humanists as a group just wanted there to be a recognition that God could not give humans everything, that humans did have questions they needed to answer that the Bible did not answer, that the church could not answer. Scientific questions for the most part. And this is where we really get this debate that you can't be religious and scientific at the same time. Now, those of you who have been paying attention to this class know two things about me. One, I'm a professor, which means I'm a scholar, which means I do research. Sure, it's social scientific, but I ask questions. I go out and find answers from other human beings and from my observations and interpretations of that. At the same time, you also know that I'm Catholic, and I cannot tell you how many times I have had to explain to people that you can do both, that it is in fact possible to be a Christian or any other religious affiliation, any belief system, even Norse paganism. I mean, it just does not matter what your system of belief is. You can be that and still believe that there are things in this world that we don't quite understand yet, that we need to ask questions about and go and explore on our own, because the answer isn't just going to appear to us from God or from whoever you believe in, and it's certainly not going to just jump out of the Bible, because that thing is written and done, right? So it's important for us to understand that when we talk about the humanists here and their importance during the Renaissances, it's not because they were antithetical to the church that they're important. It's because they started to say things like, hey, maybe human beings can answer questions for themselves. Maybe human beings can go out and ask important questions about the world that we live in and discover some truth from that, however you want to interpret it. So we're going to start to move into this triangle of tension between rhetoric, artistic, or the aesthetic, and reasoning, or the scientific. And it's a fun time to explore. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be reading a much greater number of theorists, which means a larger body of work that we're going to be reading. And I want to sort of prepare you for that. So here's what's going to happen. I believe tonight I am going to go ahead and post for you your assignment for the Pick a Theorist assignment. And I'm going to outline for you what I want you to do. And I'm not going to assign you theorists. I'm going to let you pick your theorist, just like the assignment says. Initially, I thought I was going to assign them because I would like you all to have, as many different theorists as you could possibly get off of the syllabus. But I think I'll let you pick. So here's how this works. You're going to go onto the syllabus, look at it. You're going to look at the theorists. You're going to pick who you think you might want to look into a little bit. Okay? This isn't that hard. This isn't like a huge assignment here. What this is you're going to tell the class about that theorist. Okay? And you do not have to tell them exactly what I'm going to say or have it exactly right. In fact, none of us should have exactly the same information about a theorist, because we're all going to look at them differently and we're all going to present them differently. What do I mean by present? If you're in the classroom with me, then on the date that we have scheduled for that theorist, on that date, you will give your presentation. Your presentation is just a 3 to 5 minute introduction that tells us some interesting things about that theorist, about their lives, about what might have influenced their rhetoric, whatever it is that you could find out. Here's what I suggest that you do. Start out with your book, look at the introduction for the theorist, and then, once you have an idea of who they are, go and look them up. Google, till you can Google no more. Check out different sources of information and cute little stories about them. At one point, Cicero had his own Twitter handle. I don't know if that's still the case, but that was kind of funny. Not that we're going to do Cicero, because that's long gone. But some of these others might, that you might pick up on. They might have a Twitter. And basically what it is somebody just running what they think that person might say. So this is supposed to be an interesting and fun assignment. You can't just make crap up, but you can find the fun stuff about these theorists instead of the dry, boring, born in, went to school here, did this. I mean, that's going to be necessary, important information for us to know, but it's not the most exciting, right? So you will give a 3 to 5 minute presentation just explaining to us who that person is. Now, what will you be graded on? Well, you're going to be graded just like you would on a COM 115 presentation. I'm going to be looking for credibility, style. I'm going to be looking for, yes, delivery and paralanguage, but I'm also going to be looking for organization, transitions, a preview, a review, an introduction, a conclusion, all of those things that you learned in COM 115 that make a speech formalized but also organized, okay? So those are the things. I could put up a little grading rubric for the presentation itself. For those of you not in the classroom with me right now, you will be doing the same thing. However, you will be doing it online. So you need to record a little 3 to 5 minute presentation, just the same as I just explained, and you're going to post it to the discussion board. And I'm going to go ahead and open that up right now. And you can do your presentation on whoever you want. And on the day that we are supposed to be reading that theorist, I want you to post it to the discussion board so we all have access to it. I'm hoping that this assignment makes sense to you. I will write it up again and put it online for you under the assignments section. And for those of you not in the classroom with me, I will go ahead and put up the discussion board for it. And if you have any questions or anything about this assignment, feel free to ask me. If you would rather that I just assign you a theorist because you're like, it's too hard to pick one, it could be overwhelming, I understand that. Just ask me, pop me an email or a text, and I will send you a theorist to work on, okay? Meanwhile, any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, feel free to send them along. I am doing my best to catch up. We're still on schedule, which is great, right? We're still on schedule, which is fantastic. Hopefully your reading is going relatively well, but I am just dying to get back in the classroom with you all. Hopefully Tuesday, fingers crossed. Okay, I will talk to you all soon. You have an excellent weekend.